I sat in the back of the Fairmont Chateau Whistler ballroom, watching 200 guests in their finest evening wear turn to stare at my son. Alex stood at the microphone, his prepared speech about his sister-in-law-to-be clutched in his trembling hands. That's when Victoria Pemberton, my daughter-in-law's mother, rose from her seat at the head table like a queen addressing her subjects. "Perhaps we should move this along," she said, her voice carrying that particular blend of British Columbian old money and thinly veiled contempt. "Alex, darling, we all know public speaking isn't quite your strength. Why don't you just toast the bride and sit down? Some of us have actual speeches prepared." The room went silent. Not the comfortable silence of anticipation, but the excruciating quiet of collective embarrassment. I watched my son's face flush red, watched him look to his wife Chloe for support. She was staring at her phone, thumbs moving rapidly across the screen. Later, I'd learned she was texting him. "Just sit down. You're making this awkward." I pulled out my phone and opened my email. 35 years investigating insurance fraud for Metropolitan Life had taught me something Victoria Pemberton would soon learn the hard way. Everything leaves a trail. Every lie, every shortcut, every corner cut in the pursuit of wealth and status. And I'd spent the last 3 months following hers. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up to where this really started. My name is Robert Fraser, though everyone calls me Bob. I'm 62 years old, retired for just over a year now from a career that most people found desperately boring. Insurance investigation. The kind of work that makes people's eyes glaze over at dinner parties. My late wife Sarah used to joke that I could clear a room faster than a fire alarm just by mentioning actuarial tables. Sarah died 4 years ago. Breast cancer. It was fast, and it was brutal, and it left me and our son Alex trying to figure out how to navigate a world without her light in it. She'd been the social one, the warm one, the one who knew how to talk to people. I was the numbers guy, the detail man, the one who noticed when something didn't quite add up. Alex took after his mother. He was kind, creative, artistic. He'd studied landscape architecture at the University of Toronto, had a small but growing business designing gardens and outdoor spaces for Toronto clients. It wasn't flashy work, and it certainly wasn't making him rich, but he was good at it. He had an eye for how green spaces could make people feel peaceful, could create little oases in the urban sprawl. He met Chloe Pemberton 2 years ago at a sustainability conference in Vancouver. She was there, representing her brand, as she called it. A lifestyle influencer with about 75,000 Instagram followers who posted about wellness, green living, and what she termed conscious luxury. Alex was there giving a presentation on native plant landscaping for urban environments. They seemed like a good match at first. Both cared about the environment. Both were creative types. Chloe was beautiful, charming, and she seemed genuinely interested in Alex's work. When he flew back to Toronto, they kept up a long-distance relationship. Video calls every night. Him flying to Vancouver once a month. Her coming to Toronto when she could. I met her for the first time when Alex brought her home for Thanksgiving 6 months into their relationship. She was polite enough, complimented our modest house in the Beaches neighborhood, though I caught her photographing her food before eating it and noticed she spent most of dinner checking her phone. When I asked about her family, she was vague. "Oh, my mother's in real estate in Vancouver. My father passed when I was young. I have a younger sister, Sienna." Real estate turned out to be a significant understatement. Victoria Pemberton owned Pemberton Properties, one of the largest commercial and residential development companies in British Columbia. The woman was worth somewhere north of $50 million, with developments across Vancouver, Whistler, and Victoria. She lived in a mansion in Shaughnessy, drove a Range Rover, and from what I could gather through casual Google searches, treated her wealth like a divine mandate. I met Victoria for the first time at Alex and Chloe's engagement party in Vancouver. Alex had proposed after 18 months of dating, and Chloe's family insisted on hosting the celebration at their home. I flew out alone, wished Sarah could have been there to help me navigate what I already suspected would be uncomfortable social terrain. The Pemberton Mansion was everything you'd expect. Massive stone and glass structure with views of the mountains, perfectly manicured grounds, staff in crisp white shirts passing canapes. Victoria greeted me at the door with a handshake that barely made contact and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Robert, is it? How lovely to finally meet Alex's father. He's told us so much about your work in, what was it again? Insurance? Insurance investigation. Yes, I said. How fascinating. And you're retired now? Just over a year. How wonderful. You must have so much time on your hands. She said it like a diagnosis of a terminal illness. Do come in. I'm afraid most of the guests are from our circle, but I'm sure you'll find someone to talk to. I spent that evening watching. It's what I'd done for 35 years, and old habits die hard. I watched Victoria hold court, watched how she directed conversations, how she managed her daughter like a product, steering her toward the right people, positioning her for photographs. I watched Chloe transform in her mother's presence, becoming more performative, more aware of angles and lighting, and I watched Alex shrink. My confident, creative son became quieter, laughed less, agreed more. When someone asked about his work, Victoria cut in before he could answer. Alex is between projects at the moment. The Toronto market is so different from Vancouver, isn't it? We're hoping he might consider relocating once they're married. Chloe's career really requires her to be based here. Alex hadn't told me he was between projects. When I asked him about it later that night, back at my hotel, he admitted he'd lost 2 major clients in the past month. Both had canceled suddenly, with vague explanations about going in a different direction. He seemed defeated in a way I'd never seen before. It's fine, Dad, he said. Things are just slow. And Chloe's right, maybe Vancouver makes more sense. Her following is based here, her sponsors, everything. What about your business? Your clients in Toronto? I can start over. Lots of people need landscape architects in Vancouver. But I heard the doubt in his voice. The resignation. The wedding was planned for 14 months later. Chloe wanted a summer wedding, wanted everything perfect, and apparently perfect meant Victoria planning every detail. The venue, the flowers, the menu, the guest list. Alex was consulted on approximately nothing. When he suggested inviting some of his university friends, Victoria vetoed it. Chloe's followers will be expecting a certain aesthetic, darling. We need to be mindful of the optics. I watched my son disappear piece by piece over those months. The phone calls became less frequent. When we did talk, he sounded tired. He'd moved to Vancouver 6 months before the wedding, was living in a condo Chloe owned, trying to build a client base. It wasn't going well. How's the job search? I asked during one call. It's fine. I've got a few leads. Alex, it's harder than I thought, Dad. Victoria knows a lot of people in the industry here, and whenever I get close to landing something, it seems to fall through. I don't know. Maybe my portfolio isn't strong enough for the Vancouver market. Or maybe, I thought but didn't say, someone was making phone calls. The wedding was set for July 15th at the Fairmont Chateau Whistler, a $150,000 affair, all paid for by Victoria, a fact she mentioned frequently. The rehearsal dinner was the night before, for immediate family and wedding party only, about 40 people, though Victoria had invited various business associates and important connections, swelling the number to nearly 200. I flew in the day before, rented a car, drove up the Sea to Sky Highway. It had been years since I'd been to Whistler. Sarah and I had come here for our 20th anniversary. The memory made the drive harder than it should have been. The rehearsal dinner was in one of the Fairmont's private ballrooms. I arrived to find Alex already there. Looking uncomfortable in a suit I suspected Victoria had bought him. Chloe was radiant in a white rehearsal dinner dress, probably $600 if it was a penny, working the room with her phone out, capturing content for her Instagram stories. Victoria swept in like she owned the place, which, given how much she was paying for the wedding, she might as well have. She was wearing a navy blue dress that probably cost more than my car, her silver hair styled into a perfect bob, diamonds at her ears and throat that caught the light like warnings. Dinner was served. Prime rib, probably $200 a plate. I sat between Alex's cousin from my side of the family and one of Victoria's business partners. The conversation was stilted, full of real estate talk I couldn't follow and didn't care to. Then came the speeches. Victoria's business partner went first, toasting Chloe with effusive praise about her brand, her influence, her future. Then Chloe's sister Sienna, who was barely 23 and spoke like she was reading from a teleprompter, hitting all the expected notes about sisterhood and love. Then it was Alex's turn. He was supposed to say something about Sienna, who would be getting married herself the following summer. A toast to the future bride, a bit of humor, maybe a story. Standard rehearsal dinner fare. He stood up, unfolded his notes, started to speak. His voice was soft, nervous. He'd always hated public speaking, a trait he inherited from me. Sienna, I know we haven't known each other long, but I wanted to say, that's when Victoria stood up. Perhaps we should move this along, she said, and the room fell silent. Alex, darling, we all know public speaking isn't quite your strength. Why don't you just toast the bride and sit down? Some of us have actual speeches prepared. I watched my son's face, watched the humiliation bloom across it like a bruise, watched him look at Chloe, silently begging for support, watched her look away, back to her phone. Right, Alex said quietly, to Sienna. May your marriage be everything you hope for. He sat down. The room erupted in awkward applause. Victoria smiled like she'd done everyone a favor. That's when I pulled out my phone. I'd been investigating Victoria Pemberton for 3 months. It started as idle curiosity, the way any father might Google his child's future in-laws. But what I found made my old instincts kick in. Properties acquired at suspiciously low prices. Development permits approved with unusual speed. Insurance claims that didn't quite add up. I still had contacts at Metropolitan Life, still had access to databases I probably shouldn't have had access to, and I still knew how to follow a paper trail. What I found was a masterclass in white-collar crime. Victoria Pemberton had built her empire on a foundation of insurance fraud, bribery, and creative accounting that would make a forensic accountant weep with admiration. The insurance fraud alone was staggering. Over 20 years, Victoria had filed claims on 7 different properties for fire damage, water damage, storm damage. Each claim was for just under the threshold that would trigger a detailed investigation. Each claim was paid out, usually within weeks. The properties were then renovated and flipped for significant profit. But the dates bothered me. I cross-referenced them with weather records, fire department reports, city permits. The pattern emerged like a photograph in developing fluid. The storm damage to a Yaletown condo had occurred on a day with no recorded storm activity in Vancouver. The fire damage to a Kitsilano apartment building happened in a unit that had been vacant for 6 months, with fire department reports suggesting the fire had been deliberately set. The water damage to a commercial property in Whistler corresponded with a plumbing renovation that had been scheduled weeks in advance. Victoria was burning her own properties, flooding them, claiming damage that was either fabricated or self-inflicted, collecting insurance money, and using it to fund renovations that increased property values. It was brilliant in its audacity and criminal in its execution. Then there was the bribery. Development permits in Vancouver are notoriously difficult to obtain. Environmental reviews, community consultations, zoning restrictions. Victoria's development seemed to sail through with unusual ease. I found campaign contributions to city councilors that coincidentally corresponded with permit approvals. I found consulting fees paid to the brother-in-law of a city planning official. I found a web of connections that would make a spider jealous. And the accounting. Oh, the accounting. Properties held in shell companies, income routed through numbered corporations, expenses claimed on developments that existed only on paper. It was the kind of financial engineering that stays legal only as long as nobody looks too closely. I had been looking very closely. Sitting in that ballroom, watching my son's humiliation, I opened my email and attached a file. 63 pages of documentation, cross-referenced, annotated, with source citations that would stand up in any court. I'd spent 3 months building this case the way I'd built cases for 35 years. Methodically, thoroughly, and with the kind of attention to detail that made me excellent at my job and terrible at parties. I addressed the email to 3 recipients: the Insurance Bureau of Canada, the British Columbia Securities Commission, and the CBC's Investigative Journalism Unit. In the body of the email, I wrote, "Please find attached documentation regarding systematic insurance fraud, municipal corruption, and financial irregularities involving Pemberton Properties and its principal, Victoria Pemberton. All sources are cited and can be independently verified. I am available to provide testimony if required. I hit send. Then I put my phone away and ate my prime rib. It was perfectly cooked. The wedding the next day was everything Chloe had probably dreamed of. Flowers everywhere, a string quartet, Whistler's Mountains as the backdrop. Chloe looked stunning. Alex looked exhausted. I watched him stand at the altar, watched him say his vows, watched him kiss his bride while 200 people applauded and Chloe's maid of honor filmed it all for Instagram. Victoria sat in the front row, resplendent in mother of the bride champagne silk, smiling like a cat with cream. She had no idea the clock was already ticking. The reception was more of the same. Dinner, dancing, speeches that were carefully curated and photographed. I danced with Chloe because it was expected, made small talk with relatives I'd never see again. Alex seemed to relax a little as the evening wore on, as if getting through the ceremony had released some of the tension he'd been carrying. I flew back to Toronto the next morning. Alex and Chloe were honeymooning in Bali for 2 weeks, a trip Victoria had paid for, naturally. I went back to my house in the beaches, to my routine of morning walks and afternoon reading, and I waited. The first domino fell 3 weeks later. The Insurance Bureau of Canada launched an investigation into Pemberton Properties' claim history. It was a quiet start, just an announcement that they were reviewing patterns of claims in the Vancouver commercial property sector. Victoria's name wasn't mentioned specifically, but I knew how these things worked. The review was a formality. The real investigation had already begun. The second domino fell 2 weeks after that. The CBC published a story about development permits in Vancouver, specifically questioning the speed with which certain large-scale projects had been approved, despite community opposition. Again, no names. But the properties mentioned were all Pemberton developments. Alex called me that night. He sounded worried. "Dad, have you seen the news about Vancouver development permits?" I might have caught something about it. It's all over Chloe's social media. People are tagging her, asking if her mother's company is involved. Her sponsors are nervous. She's losing followers. How's Victoria handling it? She's furious. She's saying it's a competitor trying to smear her, that it's all lies. But Dad, what if it's not? What if there's actually something wrong with how she does business? I let the silence stretch. Let him arrive at his own conclusions. "I don't know what to believe anymore," he said finally. "Believe what you can verify," I told him. "Everything else is just noise." The third domino was the big one. It fell 6 weeks after the wedding, on a Tuesday morning. The British Columbia Securities Commission raided Pemberton Properties offices, seizing computers, files, and financial records. The CBC was there to film it. By noon, it was the lead story on every news outlet in the province. By evening, the details were emerging. Systematic insurance fraud dating back 20 years, bribery of public officials, tax evasion through shell corporations, money laundering. The estimated scope of the fraud was somewhere between $8 and $12 million. Victoria Pemberton was arrested at her home. The footage of her being led out in handcuffs, trying to cover her face, went viral within hours. Chloe's Instagram lit up like a wildfire. Her followers, the brands she worked with, everyone wanted to know if she'd known, if she'd benefited, if she was complicit. Within 48 hours, she'd lost 20,000 followers. Within a week, every major sponsor had dropped her. The wellness brands, the sustainable fashion companies, the organic skincare lines, all gone. Alex called me from Vancouver, his voice raw. "Did you know about this?" "About what?" "About Victoria, about the fraud, the bribery, all of it. I could have lied, could have played ignorant, but I'd raised my son to value honesty, and I wasn't about to stop now." "Yes," I said. "How long?" "I started investigating 3 months before the wedding." 3 months. He laughed, a bitter sound I'd never heard from him before. "You knew and you didn't tell me? Would you have believed me? Would you have called off the wedding?" Silence. "You know what the worst part is?" he said finally. "I'm not even surprised. I'm shocked at the scale of it. But deep down, I always knew Victoria was off. The way she talked about business, about people, about success, like rules were for other people. And Chloe? Another long pause. Chloe's a mess. She swears she didn't know, and I believe her. But she's also more worried about her follower count than about her mother potentially going to prison. We had a fight about it last night. She said I didn't understand what this meant for her brand, for her career. I said maybe her career built on her mother's fraud money wasn't worth saving. How did that go over? She's staying at a friend's place. We're taking some time apart. The investigation unfolded over the following months, like a slowly opening flower, each petal revealing new depths of corruption. The insurance fraud was just the beginning. They found evidence of code violations in developments, of safety inspections that had been falsified, of tenants who had been harassed into leaving rent-controlled apartments so Victoria could redevelop the properties. The business partner I'd sat next to at the rehearsal dinner turned witness for the prosecution, testifying about kickbacks and bribes. The city councilors who'd received campaign donations suddenly developed acute memory problems. Victoria's lawyers fought hard, but the evidence was overwhelming. I'd made sure of that. In November, 5 months after the wedding, Victoria Pemberton pleaded guilty to 14 counts of fraud, 3 counts of bribery, and 7 counts of insurance fraud. The plea deal kept her out of federal prison, but she was sentenced to 3 years in provincial custody, ordered to pay back $8.2 million in restitution, and banned from operating any business in British Columbia for 15 years. Pemberton Properties was dissolved. The mansion in Shaughnessy was sold to pay legal fees and restitution. Victoria's empire, built over 30 years, collapsed in less than 6 months. Alex and Chloe separated officially in December. She filed for divorce in January, citing irreconcilable differences. From what Alex told me, she'd become bitter, resentful. She blamed him for not supporting her through the scandal, conveniently forgetting that he'd tried to support her until she made it clear her primary concern was her Instagram metrics, not her mother's victims. Last I heard, Chloe had moved to Toronto, was trying to rebuild her influencer career with a focus on authentic vulnerability and rising from scandal. She had about 12,000 followers, mostly people who enjoyed watching train wrecks. Alex stayed in Vancouver, but moved out of Chloe's condo. He found a small apartment in East Van, started taking on small landscaping jobs. It was slow at first, but word spread. It turned out that when you weren't connected to a criminal enterprise, people were more willing to hire you. He called me last month with good news. He'd landed a major contract to redesign the outdoor spaces for a new co-op housing development. City-funded, legitimate, exactly the kind of work he'd always wanted to do. The developer asked me how I wanted to handle the contract, he said. Full transparency, everything above board. It felt good, Dad, to know it was all legitimate. I'm proud of you, I told him. I'm proud of you too. For what? For protecting me. I know that's what the investigation was really about. You didn't do it for justice or to right wrongs. You did it because someone hurt your son, and you weren't going to let them get away with it. He was right, of course. I could dress it up as civic duty, as moral obligation, as ensuring the rule of law. But the truth was simpler and more primal than that. Someone had humiliated my son. Someone had made him feel small and worthless and less than. And they'd done it with the arrogance of someone who believed their wealth and status made them untouchable. I'd spent 35 years proving people wrong when they thought they were untouchable. Victoria Pemberton was just another case file, another pattern of fraud waiting to be exposed. The only difference was this time, it was personal. I'm retired now, officially and completely. I sold the house in the beaches last month, too many memories of Sarah in every room. I bought a small condo in Vancouver, close to Alex's apartment. We have dinner once a week, sometimes more. We talk about his work, about my plans to maybe do some consulting, about everything and nothing. We don't talk about Victoria much. She's serving her sentence. We'll be out in 20 months with good behavior. Chloe doesn't speak to Alex anymore, which is probably for the best. Sienna, the younger sister, got married last summer. We weren't invited. Sometimes I think about that moment in the Fairmont ballroom, watching Victoria humiliate Alex, watching my son shrink under her contempt. I think about how different things might have been if I'd confronted her directly, if I'd made a scene, if I'd done what any angry father might do. But I'd learned a long time ago that the most powerful weapon isn't anger or violence or even confrontation. It's information. It's knowing how to look at a pattern and see the truth underneath. It's being willing to follow the trail, no matter how long it takes or where it leads. Victoria Pemberton built her empire on the assumption that no one was paying close enough attention, that her fraud was too small scale for anyone to notice, her corruption too subtle for anyone to care. She was used to people underestimating her because they were dazzled by her wealth, her confidence, her apparent success. She made the mistake of underestimating me because I was quiet, because I was retired, because I worked in insurance investigation. For God's sake, the most boring job in the world. Boring, maybe, but extremely thorough. I think that's the lesson in all this, if there is one. Don't mistake quiet for weak. Don't mistake patience for indifference. And never, ever underestimate what a father will do when someone threatens his child. Because sometimes the most dangerous person in the room isn't the one making noise. It's the one in the back, watching, listening, remembering, taking notes.